want to talk about housing in general in our community, and specifically affordable housing and supportive housing. And those are two different things. One thing that we've been hearing through the village and through our community conversations is that, first of all, affordable to the systems, the housing systems are not affordable to the people, to the residents. And so there's a different definition for what is affordable. So we want to talk about that tonight, right? We want to hear from you all. What does affordable look like? Let's get some definitions wrapped around some things tonight. And then even supportive housing. One of the things that we're also hearing is, listen, the city is bringing in these developers, and we have all of these development projects popping up and conversations around them popping up, and we're not comfortable with some of the what we're hearing, right? And some of the different models that are being presented. And so what we wanted to do today as well is have a conversation and make sure that residents understand that, guess what? These developers need to conform to the residents. And so let's hear from you all what it is that you would like to see going up as supportive housing, right? As affordable housing. What does that look like in our neighborhoods? What does that look like for residents? What does that look like for the people that are living in the neighborhoods? And also, what does it look like to go beyond renting to asset and wealth building to home ownership, right? What does that look like? And is there a pathway for that through supportive housing and affordable housing models, right? So let's jump right in.
Yeah, and just some basic housekeeping. I will let you guys know that the city commissioners had a emergency meeting that they were working on, a workshop, and then they had a meeting tonight because they would have actually been here at this meeting. So if you guys are good with it, we are recording because they wanted to actually hear your voice. Because there's a lot of decisions that they have to make in terms of how we use different funds, et cetera, for affordable housing. We can inform the work of what does a developer look like that the community wants. And here's the why. So we wanted to give you guys as much information as possible so we can advocate and imagine in a way that makes sense both for the community but also for the city stakeholders themselves. So if we were to start with affordable housing, does anyone know what we mean or what is affordable housing? Anyone?
That was my question. How do they go by, what is affordable housing? How do that fall in place? Say for instance, you got, most affordable housing go off income, right?
Yep.
So you got an income, say you make $1,200 a month. Mm-hmm. Your rent is $650, your light and gas. How's that affordable when you got, say, 4 kids and you're a single mother?
Right. So
is that really affordable?
Yeah. So the question is, the definition of affordable, and when you actually do the math of it, it doesn't seem so affordable.
That was the point I was getting at.
Yeah. So that's what this brother right here was saying is basically affordable has an asterisk next to it because it doesn't seem affordable. I actually, I'm going to co-sign on what you said because I can understand where that comes from because there's actually a model called the Alice model that actually looks at how much does it cost to actually live, right? And so it starts to actually make these scales to show, wait a second, one thing with my fender bender, and now I'm actually jacked.
Yeah. One
dentist, and I get my tooth done, and now I'm actually messed up. So when you say affordable, you need to look at my budget and see that I'm actually stretched thin, and I'm losing ground.
Exactly.
So I hear what you're saying.
And in that model, in that framework, the Alice framework, what that actually establishes is even a family of 4 would have to be making $60 an hour to be in a sustainable place,
yep.
Right? And that is including child care, the health care, costs for transportation, and all of the things. And that does not take into account, which they are going to be working on bringing in some additional data points into that Alice framework. What about broadband? Right. These last 2 years, everybody has been heavily reliant umbrella. So there's some additional budget line items that we're all paying that are not being calculated into what our incomes should look like to be able to afford a home.
And so to answer your question about how it's calculated, there's formulas, right? So they have some basic formulas that the government will say, this is actually how we define affordable housing if you're a single person, if you're a two-person family with adults, if you have this many kids, et cetera, that's how they're determining affordable housing. Right, wrong, or indifferent, as we talked about with the budget, it might not, actually the math might not work, but that's actually how it's actually set. Now, Nakia, you actually mentioned something else, and it was, there was another thing, not affordable housing, what was the other type?
Supportive housing.
Ah, there it is.
Supportive housing, and oftentimes we hear about supportive housing models coming in, and we think, oh my goodness, this is going to be a housing space that is going to support those with mental illnesses or those with drug addictions and all of these sorts of things. And what I think often goes untold or unsaid is that there are many, many supportive housing models. There are supportive housing models that support workforce. You can have a workforce development supportive housing situation, development. You can have a supportive housing model that supports just single parent households. You can have a supportive housing development that supports
It could be by a type of employment.
yeah, by type
So
of
I can say,
employment, yeah.
I want to bring in more nurses.
Teachers,
or
educators,
teachers.
yeah.
So one of the things that that was interesting through the research was a lot of times that's never mentioned to the community. You mean to tell me I could do supportive housing and it's focused on workforce development? So I can get a leg up and get skilled up? You know, a lot of times we only hear about a couple different mechanisms, and you know, there's different reasons that I was reading about why. Obviously there's different funding sources that come into developers, and some of those are more used than others.
That was so nicely said.
I know, I was trying to find the right words. Some of those are more used than others, and so a lot of times communities don't even know that that's possible to have workforce development or something focused on different types of demographics, meaning single mothers or single parents, or if someone was coming, as you said, like nurses or teachers, you know, so that they're underdocumented youth. You can have supportive housing for youth. So as they're transitioning into the workforce, and I'm 22 and I'm trying to actually figure things out, I could do supportive housing for youth.
Yeah, go ahead. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
Just jump right in.
So oftentimes you hear the term Section 8 housing. Is that the same as affordable housing, or does that fall under, or is that different, and how does it vary?
It falls within it in terms of some of those federal and state funding pathways. You're thinking Mission HUD, for example. You can have Section 8 housing that falls within an affordable housing unit. But again, this can be defined by the community, what this looks like. So you can have an affordable housing space that is, for example, I've seen models where it is income contingent, so you pay based on what you can afford. And there can be families in there that are doctors and lawyers that, you know, they're paying significantly more because they can afford more. But it's such a nice housing development, right? That, and also that builds self-esteem, right? So that folks aren't saying, oh, well, you can tell where the Section 8 houses and homes and, you know, the low-income homes and all. Excuse me, if we're talking about reemerging from this pandemic, if we're talking about community connectedness, if we're talking about disrupting systems and changing them so that they work for the people, why can't we reimagine what our housing developments in our community looks like? Why are we not thinking about how do we bring mixed income housing into the affordable housing umbrella?
So I like what you said there. And Kathy, I saw your hand too, so I'm going to call on you and then Dr. Dotson. and I'll call you next. So I got 1, 2, 3. But you bring up a really good point, because first we started talking about some of the different models and some of the different ways to imagine what affordable housing could look like. And then, Dr. Bayless, what you did was you added another layer on top of that, which is very unique, which is mixed use housing or mixed income housing. So you're actually creating an ecosystem, right? So it actually creates dignity.
Yes.
And that's actually a really key term. So through my research, what I was finding is, this was actually based upon Baltimore and Philadelphia, what they did was they did a lot of mixed income housing, and that actually, so now when I say I live on that street, everybody's not like, yeah, just drop me off on the corner and I'll walk. Because I don't want you to know that I live there. You know, it created a dignity for those residents, and that is actually creating a culture if you have dignity. It just comes from it. So I wanted to bring that up, and then
I was going to say, my name's Brent.
How you doing,
I didn't
Brent?
mean to cut you off.
No worries.
I was going to say, isn't that a criteria out in the East Coast New York area where like all housing, that's written into their actual plans.
Correct.
All housing
Yes.
has to have all social classes of people in it. They have to have X amount, was like 20%
Yep.
per building or something like that.
San Francisco's the same way, another good example.
Miami's growing in that space
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Go ahead, Kathy, sorry about that.
So-
No,
No,
that is
it's
not
not.
here, but in some major metropolitan areas and cities such as New York, such as in Florida, San Francisco, some of the, larger areas, they do have stipulations for all developments that any apartment building, any sort of housing development that goes up must support X percentage of moderate to low income families.
Go ahead, Kathy.
So, thank you. So, subsequently, I thought of something else too, but our history, especially if we look at redlining and development of the projects in Chicago and Detroit and my hometown, hello, of course it makes tons more sense to have, it's not sustainable to have one income level in any particular neighborhood. That is just not sustainable, and our history has proven that. Hello, let's just pay attention to what's happened in the past. Okay, so we know we don't do that so well. My question actually started out with when I first heard about supportive housing, and this is probably based on my last few years working with a lot of houseless folk and in-between folk at a variety of organizations, that supportive housing would be helping folk, like a lot of people that I'm working with or that I'm friends with, get just enough money to get that first and last month's rent and pay the 2 months rent ahead of time, and they can move into an apartment, but no one's ever taught them how to budget. No one's ever taught them that they gotta pay, they gotta plan ahead for these bills. And I'm not dissing that, because if you ain't been taught it, how the heck are you supposed to know it? And so my understanding with supportive housing was helping folk understand some of these things. Like,
Yes.
thank my mom, she made me learn how to balance a checkbook, whatever. But, oh my God, I am so grateful for her.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and Doc, I'll call on you next, and then I have someone at this table over here. Yes.
So is that what supportive housing is too?
Yes, supportive
Okay.
housing wraps resources, and they're very specified resources that support, like, for example, if it was workforce development, let's say, then the resources that are wrapped around the folks in that space would be around barrier removal for employment services, making sure that they have the remedial learning or any sorts of learning and certifications, driver's license, other credentials, if you're underdocumented, those sorts of things, but making sure that the resources that are necessary to get those folks well into and sustainably into
Yeah.
workforce, that's what the resource would be wrapped around those folks.
So it's baked into, another one's transportation that came to mind.
Yeah.
It's baked into the model of supportive housing in general. Dr. Dotson.
So my next question then, are we talking about like a particular, like a multi-dwelling unit or high-rise, or these individual homes, or how does affordable housing?
Yeah, let me touch on that.
support
So
housing?
it's interesting you brought that up, because we didn't even get to the different types of affordable housing, because there's different types. I could have a townhouse,
Okay,
and I can make that affordable. I could have row houses, which are like, you've probably seen them in the brownstones on the Bill Cosby show,
Yeah.
where they had all the brownstones. you can actually have higher density. So you're actually now talking about triplex, which is 3 levels, or you can even have even bigger than that, which would be like a normal apartment type complex system. You could have retail on the bottom, and then have stuff up top. So there are a couple different, and if you have some information, if you will have some questions about that, I do have some like documents kind of showing the different types of housing models that kind of exist in general here in the U.S.
Are any of them individual homes?
Yeah, you can do that
individual
too.
homes.
Yes.
And that's what I was gonna get to, is that's really for the residents, for the people to determine too, is, does it make sense to have a multi-unit space? Or would we prefer to see separate housing units?
Right.
Detached housing units. That's an option too, right? But it's really about what works for the community.
And it's not an either or.
Right.
So let me, you go in and then Gina, I got your name.
Yeah, we had a meeting, the grandparent meeting,
Yes.
and a lot of seniors were saying that they have affordable housing, but their income, maybe $1,200 a month, the rent is $780, like with 1 bedroom. And some of them was complaining about their rent gives tax on level, and they didn't have like stuff like Washington Ave, because some of them,
Yeah.
they talk like that.
Yeah.
So, is there anything for seniors?
Yes.
Yes.
You can develop, you can ask that, listen, what we see a need for is a development, a supportive supportive housing model that is supporting grandparents and foster.
That's more than a house.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So let me give you an example. I was talking to one of the commissioners, and she was talking about what happens to folks that are actually they hit some barriers, so they're actually in a transition place, whether that's a hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the models was making sure that those places of transition have a kitchen, right? Because I'm trying to get back on my feet. I've got to stay here for a temporary moment, and then I can actually keep moving, but I got to pause right here for a second. But if you can't cook,
Or wash your clothes.
or wash your clothes. So those are things that we can actually imagine and put into some requests and say, these are the things that we would like if we're talking about multi-tenant for seniors, or if we're talking about multi-tenant for youth, or if we're talking about workforce development supportive housing, et cetera, et cetera. It literally is a kind of a blank slate that you say, here's things that we want. And then you guys as residents can say, city, this is what we want. Can you go find folks that can do this and talk to us? So now we're matching what the residents want with what the city can do. Gina.
Well, yeah, when we were talking about the sustainable housing,
Yep.
Individual homes per se, that gives them a pathway to ownership, but we must have black credit unions or something that's going to give them some monies to understand the community. They can't put equity into something if they don't have anything to give
That's correct.
to go towards something. But it also, when we say their self-esteem, ownership is powerful. If we could relay that importance, even if we gave classes on how to apply, even what to put down. Do we have funds available, or some kind of establishment like our CCG or something to loan them money? They might be high risk, but we would have that back for them. So they see the importance of the responsibility, on-time payments. No, you can't make any arrangements. This is this. We have to be stern with it now, but at least to allow them an opportunity so at that low income, quote unquote, they still can forge ahead and have something of their own.
So a couple things, and I see your hand, my brother. Is you were talking about ownership, and there's several models for ownership, whether that's a single home, whether that's a town home. I've even seen apartment units, think about New York, that are doing that. So there are several different ways to do that. And then I think part B of that, I'm just affirming what you're saying, is some type of financial mechanism to help folks kind of get that leg up, get started, right? And then I think, Kathy, as you were mentioning, how do those supports help them, understand how that works, right? Because, I'm in there. But then I actually went way backwards because I didn't know what I was getting into. So I hear you on that
Because
too.
insurances are going up, food's going up, you know, they have to be able to budget, but we have to have something to be able to budget with.
Yep.
Let me call on this brother and I see your hand
So
up.
what I see, what everyone's keep referring back to, it sounds like we need like a financial literacy course of some kind of workshop where everyone in this community can get the things that they didn't get as far as understanding credit in terms of equity and everything.
Let me ask you something. You made an excellent point. There are programs happening across the community, across community partners that are providing kind of financial literacy, financial learning programs.
Yeah.
And so my question is, why aren't our people accessing those resources? Is it, and this is legit, right? Is it because, and this helps us too, in terms of how we push on systems to get the things into our communities that are needed, right?
No, I
But-
just simply did not know there was any financial literacy courses that exist, period. For the last few years, I've been trying to push for Battle Creek Central to put, for example, this is a quick example, in Harper Creek High School right now, they got Blue Ox Community Credit Union for the students.
Yep.
So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they get to take these credit courses in high school, and they get to bank in school. So they get to understand how to use their debit card. I mean, as far as I think sophomores all the way to seniors. So by the time they're graduated, they at least know how to do like basic banking. I've said this a couple of times, trying to get Battle Creek Central on board, at least to put an Omni Express in their school. But I've ended up on closed ears several times. So as far as like financial literacy, I don't know who's teaching that in our community like that, but I know that's a huge need because we can't give people resources if they don't know how to use the tools.
Absolutely.
Well, you brought two good points, and I see I see both you guys because you were talking about the youth, and at the same time we're talking about adults.
Yeah, well, the adults can't
Because
pass
it's
it
both
on.
in,
Yeah,
right?
We can't pass it on if we don't know it.
That's right. So you got to start with probably a parallel strategy.
Yeah.
If
And
we're
that is
actually really to
happening
do
in the
financial
village.
literacy.
I'm
Okay.
just putting a plug in.
Yeah, it
We
is.
have
That
to
is
change the
happening in the
verbiage
village.
as well.
Yes.
Because if we say financial education classes, they don't know.
No.
Want to learn how to make payments on your home and keep your home? Come to this class.
Yep.
Want to learn how to buy a house? Come
Break
here.
it down to them so they just,
Learn how to
you got to
build
come
your
down a
credit,
little bit on that
Yes.
level so they
credit,
understand.
yes.
And they're not intimidated by proper grammar.
Yeah, literacy is a scary.
Absolutely.
Financial literacy, holy crap,
Yeah,
that
what's
scares
that?
me.
Yeah,
I don't want to take that class.
that's not me, but in essence, it is you.
And I hear you saying the learning needs to be culturally relevant. It
Yes.
needs to make sense
The
for the
words,
people.
the words,
Right,
are
the
Verbiage,
language,
yeah, so
the
they're
language needs
They
to
know
be.
what's up.
Got it.
So switching gears a little bit here, looking at the aesthetics of a community, the curb appeal, the design, architecture design of the supportive homes or the affordable housing, allowing it to blend in with the immediate surrounding area, so it just doesn't stand out. Like, why is that contemporary looking structure in this area? How is it control that? Who has a say in that?
The community.
So we can, okay.
right, y'all.
You get a say. And that's why, and to, to the city's credit, that what they're doing is they're bringing the developers in to have the conversations with residents to say, what makes sense? This is kind of what we're used to doing, right? What makes sense for you all? So tell us what you would like to see. What would you like to see in this neighborhood? What would you like to see in this neighborhood? What would you like to see kind of pop up across the city that supports each of our kind of geographical footprints, if you will, across the city? So I think it's just really critical that residents understand that it really is up to you all. You do have the power to say, this is what we want to see go up. This is what we want, who we want to see in these spaces. This is how much it needs to cost. Matter of fact, let's jump in. What's affordable?
Right.
What's affordable?
I have I just have, I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but if you're talking about affordable housing, if you have a house, and like, you got in your house and you quote unquote, able to pay your mortgage, but your roof is leaking, your porch is broken, the fence is dilapidated. Is this a part of the affordable housing, whereas you have a fund where you can come and you say, well, I need this and I need that, and can you help me? And if I'm a renter, you have a program to whereas I can come and say, I would like to purchase my home. Do you have them? Is that a part of
improvement loans and
affordable
things.
housing?
Yes, well, you know, we do have, Neighborhoods Inc., Battle Creek does support in that space. But one thing I do also want to lift up is, we're talking about that in the village and what that can look like and how can we hold developers accountable. When they come into our communities and they want to come in and set up and do the developments, how do we hold them accountable to say, we also want you to pour into the surrounding neighborhood? We want you to help beautify these 10 blocks right here.
Right.
Right? Don't just come in and put up a building and do the one thing that's going to earn, get you some money and let's
Well,
be real.
How do
But-
these developers know that it's my house? I'm speaking hypothetically.
Yeah.
That it's my house that needs this roof and this porch and this fence all around it. How do the developers necessarily know, or how do developers gonna bring the attention my way as far as what's needed? I know it's a neighborhood, but I'm an individual.
Yes, they won't. The developers won't. That is up to community members and leaders and for you to lift it up and voice it and say, listen, my house, I need some help like this. I need these types of supports. Where are they in our community?
So it might help if we stand back just a little bit. One of the reasons why we're here today is because the city, and I don't know all the past, I'm not a resident of Battle Creek, let me, full disclosure, is that the city is trying to reimagine how they engage. So I can't speak about the past and how it's worked in the past. But to answer your question about how could I actually fix my house, that would actually have to come from the city. That would probably come from our NPC networks. That would come from community conversations like this so it bubbles up. And so we're actually having to coordinate how this would actually affect you, right? So I would have a place, if I was you, I would have a place where I would actually say, I want to be on that list. The city says, well, we already made the master list. Here you are on the queue. You're number 26. And we're doing so many every month. Right? For lead abatement, same thing. I got lead pipes. What do I do?
The affordable housing part.
Yes.
Okay, I got one. So since we talking about the affordable housing and the supportive housing, how do we create a system that eliminate affordable housing, because it's not affordable? It's made to keep you property driven, because some people will quit their jobs because if I don't have this job, I'll make this amount, my rent will be this amount. So how do we change the narrative to make the housing affordable and increase you so you don't be stuck renting for the rest of your life?
Ooh, that's a
good
question.
That is so
So
good.
there are a couple models that I've seen that have done such. Some are really innovative. On one end, you have things called land trusts that are actually setting it up. Nakia was actually talking about a community model where there's a revenue share. So as you level up and everybody's kind of working from a community standpoint, so you got a doctor next door and you got somebody that's just getting started right out of high school and they want to be a plumber. So they're learning the trade. So everybody's in the community and they're all helping each other. What I'm hearing from you, I think as well, is, brother, I want to own.
Pretty much.
And how do we disrupt those systems that are set up to keep us
That's how they design.
struggling?
Well, the cliff.
Yes.
So one thing that Nakia and I always talk about is if you're trying to level up in life, the systems, and this is across the country, there's a cliff. If I work harder,
Further and further away.
I move further and further back. I mean, all the systems, basically, you got to break through this glass ceiling to actually get to the next level. It's like a cliff that you have to actually traverse and get across. A good example is you were mentioning, well, I want to own. Okay, so if I want to own, that means I got to save some money. Okay, but my rent keeps going up. Okay, so I got to pay my rent, but I want to own.
And then I gotta fix a roof.
Yeah. What do you mean my water bill just went up? What are you talking about? Right? So you have these different systems that are really hard to break through because you're trying to get your savings ready. And so one of the things that's also interesting about Alice is it doesn't just have what's the minimum, but it says, what if you actually were able to save? How much would you need to make? And it's not just funny numbers, but I do know that there's actually folks advocating, talking to, Washington and state of Michigan saying, legislators saying, look, we need to actually make sure that jobs, benefits, are there so that you can have a savings and you're not actually like taking 2 steps forward and 4 steps back and trying to get there. Because you ain't gonna get there.
Yes, and ironically, United Way is actually, all of the United Ways are speaking with legislators right now. And our local United Way spoke with Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters today to lift these things up because they are critical. And when we are hearing, as community leaders, when all of us are hearing these, we're lifting them up through our relationships that we have in different systems as well to make sure that things get changed. But at the end of the day, what we're looking for is sustainable change, and that means policy change. And so that's why we wanted to have this conversation this evening with you all to say, let's define it. Like, tell us what affordable looks like. What is affordable for a single person with no children in this community? What is affordable for a single parent in this community? What is affordable for a family of 2 with 1 child? Tell us what affordable looks like in this community. So as we're having those conversations, and here's the thing, and as I want to encourage you as you see these conversations being lifted and being planned in community, please grab your friends, grab your neighbors, grab your family, and get them out here, because the more voices that show up and the more that we hear from, the more we can push, right? And in all of these conversations, you have folks over here, I keep looking over here because we got folks over here that are fighting in the housing sector right now in our community, in this space, that are hearing what you're saying too, and that's going to get carried. We have folks in real estate that are sitting here in this space that can lift these things into those decision-making tables, right? And so let's get granular. Let's talk about, what does it look like for you to be able to own your home? What does it look like for that to not, for the system to work for you instead of against you around housing? What does that look like?
And maybe we can add one more point to that, because I do know that there's several different supportive and affordable housing projects that are buzzing around the city. Right, so there was one that was over by the Dolliver project. There was the Kmart. What are they going to do with that one? There's small ones. There's here in the village, Youth Village. There's affordable housing
down there.
That's right. So there's several that are being considered. That's why these conversations are very important, because there are stakeholders that are trying to decide, and with that many projects, it means that there's probably multiple developers. And so we're going to have to actually think, and when I mean you guys are going to have to think about, well, what makes sense to you. Otherwise, developer A is just going to come in, you won't even see them, do whatever they want to do, and say, this is what you're going to be in.
Right.
And we want y'all to dream too. Part of the village plan, let me tell you something. When we first started this, everybody was like, that is too big, that is too much, that's too broad. Y'all are thinking way out of the box, that can never happen. That's too aspirational. It's too pie in the sky. Okay, let's get it.
Let's go.
Let's do this, right? And it's moving, and people are feeling and seeing and being impacted, and that's important, that's critical. So what we want to do too is we want to set an example of dream. What could this look, if you could write down on a piece of paper, what does your housing situation need to look like for you to be building wealth, so saving, right? What does it look like for you to be in a home that you can have dignity in, that you can be proud of, that you are in a community where you feel connected? What does that look like?
And we have a question right here.
Yeah, I have another question. Are you from Battle Creek?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
He's been here, he stays here, he's an import.
I've been around for a while.
It used to be the community hospital where I used to work. They made affordable housing. And they started out low income, now they tripled it. So how do they justify that?
Okay, let me speak to that one a little bit, because that's actually
you
one of my
repeat,
soapbox. That's one of my soapboxes.
They started off with low income and now it's gone significantly.
So yeah, thank you for, so basically, I think Kathy was the one that mentioned redlining. There was another thing that the feds did, and what they do is they would actually, developers would come in and they would get some federal funds. They would build affordable housing, but the developer doesn't make any money off the affordable housing. So they have an incentive to say, see you later after the contract's up.
People are struggling.
That's actually baked in as we speak right now. I actually had a conversation with a stakeholder, and I said, this is a problem for me. Why does this exist? Right now, in our law, this is actually what's going across our whole country, is developer comes in, gets the affordable housing money, and then 5-6 years later, you know, everything goes up because they got to get their money out. And the stakeholder said to me, well, that's how it's actually set up, Will. And I said, well, then we got to imagine beyond that. Because redlining stopped when people imagine beyond redlining. We have to do the same thing when it comes to those type of things with our city, with our stakeholders, and say, we expect more. Sometimes beyond even how the government thinks. So case in point, I am actually fighting that situation. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
You just gave me an extra use case. But that is actually a big issue for me. That gets my blood going. Yes, Captain.
Just one of these gentlemen over here, the gentleman talking about owning a home and the barriers, and just when you're getting a little bit ahead, how something goes kaplooey. And just yesterday, I had a conversation with a guy who had to refuse overtime at work because his Section 8, if he goes above a certain level 1 month, his Section 8, I think they said, is cut off or reduced or eliminated for at least 1 or 2 more months. I'm like, now that is the policy, that is a granular thing. And this just happened to dude I know. What? What kind of incentive is that then to work harder and save more money and
That's what I mean.
to buy your
by the
home?
cliff.
Yeah, that's the cliff. So how do we get rid of
That's a
that?
perfect example of the cliff.
Yep.
And one of the things that we were looking at is, in order to get past that cliff, that gentleman has to make more money, say go fly a kite, move into a new place, learn how to actually manage that place with the higher costs, then actually move over here to ownership. That's a long journey.
And hope he doesn't break his leg or do something bad in between.
Do you see what I'm
No
saying?
flat tires, no, leaky
No
roofs,
insurance.
no, right,
Yeah.
no, yes, exactly, no hiccups.
But no one's talking about these type of things in reality, because the situation you're talking about, I'm sure that we can find all kind of use cases, but nobody's telling the business.
Right.
Right? But this exists, and no one wants to talk about, well, how do we solve it? What could it look like? Maybe a dumb idea, but at least we are trying different things to solve the problem, right? So maybe it starts off with, okay, what other philanthropic supports are there for that gentleman? What other community organizations can help that gentleman? Because losing your Section 8, if you understand how long it takes to get on that list.
Well, part of it, Will, is we've got to learn to reinvest, right? We have to learn to reinvest individually, as a community, as a people, as a city. We have got to learn to reinvest. We have to learn to invest differently.
Or
Because
learn to invest, period.
that
Amen.
part, yes, to invest. Well, part of it is too. There's been so much divestment. That now there needs to be restoration on top of reemergence. So there's a big hill to climb at this point, right? And so again, this is the same. I
That's a
think
big point, though. You should probably delve into that, because I think that what you just said about divestment, if the community all rallied together, how you gonna have
That's
40?
exactly right.
How you gonna have 40 years of divestment, and then we supposed to pool our money and actually fill up that big crater? No, that's gonna take a catalyst, right? I mean, I'm just being completely honest. That's not fair to the community that's been divested for that long. And again, it's not even specific to us. This is all across the country that this is happening.
and what we tend to see in housing is what happens. the urban areas have been divested in, and then all of a sudden, we have these really cool contemporary urban apartments that are flashy and fine and cool and look great and everything, and guess what? None of us can afford to live in them.
So we go back out to the burbs.
So now we got to be displaced again.
I live in Detroit and I see it every day.
So we kind of want to use this as an opportunity to get ahead of those things too. To say, okay, before that happens in our community, because you can look to your left and your right and see where that has happened in other communities. So how do we circumvent that from happening in Battle Creek? How do we make sure that those cool, new, flashy condos and apartments and things like that support the people that already live here? That house the people that already live and work in this community?
Well, I can tell you the first thing is we got to reimagine. It cannot be this status quo.
No.
Because everything we've been talking about today is not the normal way that it happens in every other urban area that I've seen. Generally speaking, that's not how it works. I saw your hand up first like a while ago, and then you put it back down. So I'm going to call you, and then I got you.
So is there something that, because you mentioned about the affordable housing and how the developers don't get paid off of that. So is there something at the federal level where the developers can be, I guess maybe have a tax break or some type of incentive to actually keep their prices affordable so the people living there don't lose their homes in 5 or 6 years and they can still make money?
Yeah, there's different ways where developers can still make money, but the developer has to have a mentality of creativity from the onset.
And they have to have a long game strategy versus I want to get in, do this development, and get out. If they're coming into a community with the mindset of we want to come in and we want to be transformational.
Okay.
Right? We want to hear what the people say. We want to build something that works for the community, and we're going to be here and stick it out and support on a long term.
So you're saying some developers are playing Monopoly. They're just saying next,
Yeah.
pass, go, next, next, next. There are developers that think differently about how to approach some of these models that have been talked about.
So is there a way the community can make it to where if you come to this community, if this developer does not fit the criteria, their plan doesn't fit this criteria, sayonara, we can't have you building here.
You said it, not me.
And I own that. I mean, if this is a community and we're saying you're coming here to make money but you're not supporting us, we don't need you here.
Yeah,
I mean,
and don't do shabby work that you throw up these houses or units so quickly, and then when people get in there, they're having issues, and it's the contractors, the building codes, they're skirting things, getting by because they're not getting paid what they want. So there's no pride in their work, and then the residents have to suffer. Then they have to go out and find someone to fix this, or live with that, unfortunately, because they cannot afford it, and their homeowners didn't include that, and it's structural. I've seen that time and time again.
For sure, and I think that's where we lean in and say, again, there needs to be restoration and then reemergence. So there is going to need to be a different mindset that goes into that sort of development. There has to be a different investment that
Somebody
goes in.
that does checks and balances on them, overseeing a committee to make sure their work is good. That's still involved and concerned with the residents and the people of the community.
You mean like the village leaders?
You know what I'm saying.
I see where you're going.
You know, doctor.
So I didn't write it down, but let me see if I can put it out there. When you were talking about you have to like dream or you have to reach up here, and you saying how we have all these different, we're gonna have all these different organizations and it's in our community, and I already said that I need a roof on my house, okay? So if I need a roof on my house and I come to the community, you just mentioned neighborhoods, right?
Neighbors.
I come to the neighborhoods and I already told you that I'm paying rent, but I'm just paying rent, okay?
Yep.
But I need this roof, and you tell me, you say, well, within the affordable housing, we're still talking about it, right? And you tell me, well, your roof will cost you, okay, let's say $10,000, $5,000, $8,000, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever the number is,
Okay.
yep.
But, and I'm telling you, I need a roof, it costs me $10,000. I'm paying my rent, barely paying my rent. And you tell me, okay, I'll give you the $10,000, but you gotta come up with, down payment of $2,500. How do we reasonably? Is there something that whereas you could say, we have this funding or we have this program to whereas, you know, we got this in here, you have to work for me for a year? I mean, how does that work?
So it's worked a couple different ways.
Okay.
There are things, there's a thing called a Community Development Corporation, which Neighborhoods is, but in other cities, they've actually set up programs just like you spoke of. There's also credit unions that have done the same thing, where they've actually realized we're kind of a bank, but really we're trying to actually amplify financially the whole community.
Right, but real quick, I do want to clear up one thing too. If you're renting, it's not
No,
your financial
it's
obligation
my
to.
house.
Oh, okay, so, mortgage.
The renter was separate. I want to own that house. How do I get the monies or go through
Oh, okay.
programs to own my house that I'm renting right now? And then this house over here, I need a roof and I need my porch fixed and I need my fence fixed. And I come to the program because it's out there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I can't afford to fix it, but you can afford, or you got programs to where you give me this financial help. But is it like realistic, or is it like what for? I don't know the right word. Whereas I got to come up with this much in order to get this much.
Well,
Does
you
that make sense?
mentioned a thing after you asked that question, which was about, like you said, sweat equity, or how can this work? It's
Right.
kind of like I
Like
work.
Habitat.
Yeah, like Habitat, or like I work with the E Fund, you know, that's happening in Washington Heights. And one of the things that was interesting is we baked in sweat equity into the program. Why? Because we said we have to actually start where our folks are.
Right.
What makes sense, and that's innovative.
That makes sense.
It's innovative. A lot of the stuff does not exist. A lot of the ideas that we're talking about, we have to kind of lead the way and be the trailblazers.
So it would be all right, whereas might take me 5 years to get up this extra 2,500 to get to 10,000. Is that realistic?
I would actually reach out and speak to some of our housing partners that's all they do. That's
right.
their focus is housing. And I bring up NIBC because we want to support our housing partners. And what I would say is reach out to them and see what they have in place right now. And if you find that there's gaps, if you find that, listen, you know what, here's what's happening. They have a program, I can tap into this, but I still have this gap here. Come and talk to other leaders so that we can figure out if there's other pathways, if there's other opportunities to tap into that can be supportive. But one of the things is folks got to start saying something. Like, you got to talk up, you got to say what is happening and lift it so that we can go in and start kicking some doors down and say, listen,
What is
it's not working for the people.
Does everyone here understand, like, if we're talking about housing today? Oh, I'm sorry, JR. I'll call you there. And then Gina. Where do you guys actually go when you have housing issues?
Right.
Where
are you coming
is there a
from?
one-stop shop? I actually would love to understand how the community sees that, because I know of several different organizations that are helping, but if I'm a resident, where do I go? I'll probably go to the city and say, okay, I need some help with housing. And then I'm like, well, okay, I got
Well, they
lost.
send you down to community action and you
I
have
was about
a,
to say community, yeah.
Community action,
and you can
yes.
repair it, then you got 5 years to live there. I mean, to get it free, if it's age, usually it's for seniors and income, so you can't get repairs. But the stipulation was you have to stay in your house for 5 years, or else you have to pay for what they did and all that.
So there's steps. JR.
So I'm curious about the scope of the developers and what things they have in mind. Because when you're talking about visioning, I'm thinking about if we do have affordable housing or some kind of housing, is there going to be access to quality food? Some sort of memechanism to support childcare.
Yeah.
I want to have green space there so the
Yes.
kids and the adults can play. Adequate transportation
He is in my turn.
to and from, work. Adequate transportation just through the
Yep.
neighborhoods. So
Yep.
like the bike system or the,
Yep.
I really like those electric scooters. Seem like the kids are using them more than adults are, but that's okay. space for micro businesses? Because there's so many of us in the community out there that have their little hustles, but they don't have brick and mortar places where they can be.
Yep.
And they're starting to do a little bit of that downtown. And then I don't want it to directly compete with existing projects that are going on. So, I don't know how hurtful it would be, like to be like really close, proximal to the village, compared to like we're doing it on the east end or deeper in, like moving more toward Orchard Park area.
Yep.
So those are some of the things that I'm just curious about, and what those developers are thinking, or what.
Have more meetings?
Oh, yeah, we are going to definitely have more
Yes.
meetings, and I already talked to the commissioners about attending the next one.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So JR, you were in our conversation we had earlier, and lots of conversations we've been having, and I won't be able to do adequate justice to all your different questions. At least from my thinking that I've had with Dr. Bayless, I'm just co-signing what you said.
We're on, that's what we're driving as well, is making sure that in the village, let me just clarify, the village itself is the network of all BIPOC residents in the entire city. So the village is the city, period. And then there's many villages.
So we call it right here
led-
the youth
This
village.
is the youth village, and then we have many villages that are supported across the community by various leaders. And we're working to network in other leaders. So that way we have a full network of all of the leaders, right, that are working collectively and collaboratively.
It make no difference what y'all doing. Y'all hear them
shared
noises.
goals and objectives. And so that right there, that is one of the goals and objectives of the village initiative. The work that we're doing is to make sure that, and even in alignment with how the city defines a village, 20-minute walking radius, right? So in a 20-minute walking radius, residents should have access to fresh and healthy foods, right? They should have access to health care. There should be education supports. There should be green space. There should be business incubation spaces. All of those things that you just lifted up, those are critical. Those are critical supports and needs to make a community whole. And a community is made up of multiple mini villages. And at the end of the day, our concept is it takes a village.
Hello.
It takes a village, and we have got to figure out how we come together to do exactly what you just said, that we're not stepping on toes of our community partners that are working in some of these other spaces, but more so complementing and connecting in a way that is providing better access, better pathways, better availability of resources and sources for every resident, and so that every resident can live a privileged experience in our community.
So is the village you're talking about an extension of the youth village, which is happening here, or is it just
So
the
the
same?
youth village is part of the village. It's a mini village within the greater village. And the youth village, now, the unique thing about the youth village is the youth village does include youth from all of the different communities and such. But we wanted to really honor the fact that the work that we are building out was birthed out of the youth village.
So all the years that Pastor McCoy has been working on the youth village, with plans and et cetera, we took that and then said, let's amplify that. But this is so great, and Pastor McCoy was generous enough to say, how could this help the Latino community? How could this help the Burmese community? How could this help folks in Post-Franklin, Post-Addition, depending on who you're asking, right? And so it's one of those, or Meacham. Right? So it's one of those things that because of his graciousness, we were able to take what he did and amplify all that thought and say, okay, let's get this village started, Washington Heights. We got a pilot. Okay, we show proof of concept. This is working. We're going to get this built.
And that's why we started where there was already significant investments made, and start to build out.
Yes, sir.
I got a Battle Creek history question. Most of us from Battle Creek. Am I not mistaken? It's the East End and Post Addition?
Yeah.
Is that the difference between those?
School was Post because of the cereal.
Right.
It's on the east end of town.
I'm just saying the nicknames of the sides,
Franklin was an elementary
Oh, okay.
years ago
So that's why they
that
say
closed,
Post-Franklin.
which is across from CA.
Uh-huh.
So
I seen an argument about that on Facebook, the difference between the East End And
It's all
Post
the
Edition.
East End.
Yeah,
But
they
it's
like
Post
they
Edition because
they hold on to that name.
back in the day, Post Edition was.
But technically, this is the West End.
It's cultural.
Or the DDA.
Yeah, but it's the hood.
Boston Heights.
You know what I mean? It's always been called the hood before we got here. It's called the hood.
Yes, please.
So there is a community or organization or community developer in Portage, Michigan. Full Circle Communities, I do believe is the name.
Okay.
And they actually have permanent supportive housing already enacted. Beautiful site called Selenon Park in Portage, where I help get Veterans House. So this is how I know about this place. And when I say this place is immaculate, it looks like a 5-star hotel. I mean, it's newly developed. They have case management services on site to help anyone who lives there with financial literacy or whatever it is specifically that's tailored to them and their individual needs. So I don't know how Full Circle Communities got involved in Portage, Michigan. It seems like they know what they're doing over there. But I mean, I guess does our leaders have conversations with nearby cities and say, how did you find these developers? How are you helping your residents have affordable housing and stay housed and move forward in their journeys?
I would say right now we're just beginning the conversation.
Okay.
I did actually just speak with someone that was representing a developer Friday. But one of the things that's interesting, again, this is really the community has to decide this. If you're doing affordable housing, the normal model is you get all the folks up in one really big building because it's easier to do supports. But again, that's going to be the affordable housing complex. It's harder to actually, let's say, have row houses or townhouses or
Kind of that mixed income.
and mixed income, because from a support standpoint, and I'm wrapping around doing supportive services, I just made my life a lot harder. So it could be a both and. It could be different strategies for different areas. It's not just one size fits all, but we wanted to at least inform you guys so on our next meeting we can actually start saying, here's our list, right? So we wanted to give you guys information and talk to folks in the community so you can start to say, okay, I'm starting to get a picture of what I want.
Yes.
So I have I guess like a comment statement question.
Yeah.
So then if we were to have a diversity of like the row houses, the brownstones, and the multi-floor units, could we then maybe have a hub like Neighborhood Inc. Or the Youth Village who could say, if you want to apply to these places, your applications come through us, and our committee actually, based upon your needs, can say you would be a better candidate for this property because we can offer this, that, or this, versus just saying, okay, you apply here, and then here's the keys and you go on about your business.
Yes, you
We're
can.
working on it. Yes.
Yes, you
Yes,
can.
Okay.
yes,
In
absolutely.
fact, you could do the same type of housing, but you could have retail on the bottom to actually make the numbers match.
Yep.
And the numbers work out. So that retail.
Or child care center.
Child care center.
That's perfect on site.
There are things that can be done.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, Kathy, sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. I just want to make sure. Y'all have a couple hands up over there. I just want to.
No, it was just talking about the contractors, but go ahead, I'll go after you, Kath.
Thank you. So I've had these conversations with other people. I wish it was my brainstorm, but it isn't. What about all these big ass schools around here that are all empty? And the answer I always get, well, they weren't designed to house people, so it's too expensive to convert them. And there's too much asbestos that has to be remediated. And there's lead paint that has to be blah, 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 blah. Really? I really struggle to figure out how you could landfill all those bricks and all that building and all that asbestos cheaper than it would cost you to build something new. I mean, that is just...
Go ahead.
And I know I'm not the first one. But all I want is, will someone please go look at one of those doggone buildings and tell me?
We've actually already poured.
Oh, yay!
We've actually already poured
My bad.
tens of thousands in a feasibility study. We've had engineers going through Southwestern for
Yeah?
quite some time.
Oh, I go by there all the time. Think,
Yes,
oh, my
we've
new
had
condo.
engineers going through Southwestern doing a full feasibility study for the village to acquire Southwestern. We also have one of our partners trying to acquire Washington, which the village would also support and use, and we're talking about making sure that there is some supportable or affordable housing units in both locations.
Yeah. You are. You really are. Oh,
Yes.
hallelujah! Wow.
We're looking at, yes, we're looking at Southwestern being a multicultural center with potentially, this is what we're aspiring for, a health clinic in there, incubation space for entrepreneurs and businesses, for pop-up shops and those sorts of things, arts and culture space for youth to be able to perform and do arts programs and learning and so forth. We're also looking, yes, supportive housing space or affordable housing space. We haven't quite defined that, but we know that we want some housing that is unique to this community in both spaces. Education support, I did say business hub, legal support.
I'd be willing to help start vegetable gardening there. Really? I mean, that'd be
Well, we
so
have,
cool.
we have the architecture firm as well. We have them doing a feasibility for urban farm, the whole shebang over in that area as well. We're looking at environmental justice as well. How do we,
the bricks and the gotta go to the landfill.
Yes, how do we support environmental justice in our communities of color and marginalized communities or divested communities as well? You know, what does that need to look like? And how can we set up sustainable systems that support asset and wealth building across our community and really again, that connectedness, that social community connectedness where all of the systems are working integrally together for everyone.
Like right tonight, we're just talking about housing, but obviously this connects to lots of different components.
Conservation, all kinds
We have
of
talked to
things.
the city about Southwestern for codes, understanding zoning, understanding, as you mentioned, how to use that building effectively. You know, there's been, I've talked to BCPS, I mean, there's all kind of things. So I'm really excited about those opportunities with the schools to look at how to actually reimagine those. Because to your point, they're already in the ground.
Yeah, and across our nation, all our urban places are full of these empty schools.
Yeah, we're looking at arts and culture spaces for even art and culture incubation where we can really pour into young artists and teach them how to use their skills to earn money. And because we look at it as a two-track, and I said, you know, we kind of talked about this earlier when we said we're hearing youth and adults pop up, and we look at it as parallel, right? That there is, for our youth, we look at education and academic and learning readiness so that they get on the path to economic development readiness, and labor participation and economic participation. And so we're looking at mechanisms to, from a data standpoint, that's my thing, y'all, I apologize for data because that's my thing. So, but from even a data standpoint, how can we assure at least a 1% increase of BIPOC residents into our local labor market, therefore increasing our local GDP, gross domestic product. So ultimately raising the value of every property in this city.
Just to let them know what BIPOC is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Black, Indigenous, and all people of color. The village is comprised of our three predominant communities of color in Battle Creek: African American, Latinx, and Burmese.
You said Black.
Indigenous.
Don't listen to him.
No.
BIA.
No, it's the O is other.
Oh,
So with the affordable housing, would there be like security like on the inside or like, will it
That's
be
for you to
secure?
define.
That's one of the things you say. I need that done. Because that's safety, that's health and wellness. That's actually making a culture of what you want for your kids' kids.
Because when I lived in LA, even 25 years ago, they always had security buildings and you had to buzz to get in just for safety.
It was just
no
what
matter
it
where
was.
you live.
Yeah, because I'm just saying, like, speaking on the townhouses, because, like, it was an incident with me the other morning, and it kind of freaked me out, so in the morning, I kind of have, like, this anxiety to go to the bus stop, because it's so dark back there, so it's just, like, that's
That's not safe at all, especially for women like me who go
Right.
out and go to work every day.
Right. Well, and I hear two things that came out of what you just said, transportation and safety.
Yes, ma'am.
And the transportation is not situated in a way that you could get to it safely to get to work
Right.
in the morning.
'Cause it's
So
like-
that's an issue, yes.
Yeah, because I'm here and the bus stop is here, but in between is a basketball court, but around it is darkness in the morning. So it's like it can come from this side, that side, or just out the darkness. So anything could happen.
Right, right.
I just feel like it should be secured or more lights than anything.
Gentleman behind you asked a question, I'm gonna call him.
That's just like more of a statement, like say, a vision, like we got everything that everybody been saying in the village. So say we design a house in development.
Yep.
Where you're not gonna be here for the rest of your life, renting, property renting. So we're gonna get that out of your mind. Say
Right.
it's a house and assistance program you in for 3 years. It's gonna teach you about building credit. You got transportation, you got childcare, you got all that stuff that the village got anyway.
Yep.
And then like in 3 or 4 years, you out to home ownership. That's just
So you know what we're doing? We're incubating wealth.
That's right.
We're incubating wealth with what you just mentioned.
I was just gonna ask, so in the affordable housing sector, would we have like any type of stipulations to where the owners of these establishments have to keep them in a certain decent standard? Like, keep them up to date with the times?
Whatever is established at the onset of that development project and written into
Okay,
that proposal
yeah,
has to be adhered to.
okay.
So that's why it's so important to hear from the community to say, tell us what you, let's give them a list. Let's be able to say, here developers, this is the list for this neighborhood. Here's our key priorities in this neighborhood: safety, transportation, childcare, access to fresh food. That's our priorities. That's what you have to meet here. And we also have the priority of maintaining the facility to a certain standard. And that standard looks like this. So that's what we've got to be better at, is to step in and say from a resident level, from the resident voice, to say, this is what residents are demanding. Period. That's what it has. That's what this has to look like.
So is it just a I'm sorry, I might be speaking out of turn. I don't know if nobody's hands was up. I was just wondering though, because I mean, I'm born and raised in Battle Creek, and the projects, as we call it,
Yep.
I have not seen any upgrades on that since they've been built, and they get federal funding. So I don't understand if it's okay. So it can start with us.
Exactly.
Yeah, it can start with our community, but to me, this needs to go all the way to the top, because why is it the federal allows residents to live in such poor quality? They don't have anyone coming in to say, this is unacceptable. This needs to be upgraded. These residents need to live in modern times. I mean, that's just, I guess, where I'm coming from.
That can be a priority. That can be a priority that's lifted up to the city to say, listen, our existing projects on the north side need to be invested in, need to be reinvested in and rethought, right?
Period.
Yes, and that's it. That's priority number one, right? And then priority number two, these other developments coming up, this is what the one over, if you're looking at one over here, this is what this needs to prioritize. If you're looking over here, this is what this needs to prioritize. If you're looking over here, this is what this needs to prioritize. You see what I'm saying? So it's really critical that residents step up and say, this is what we demand show up in our community.
And what's interesting is a lot of times we use our voice and we're like, I heard an echo, but nobody actually heard the echo. I feel like I'm just talking to myself.
Yep.
This is not the case right now. There's too much movement that's happening on the undercurrent with developers coming in, coming around, looking at properties. This and this is moving, and they need our voice. I want our voice to take the lead.
Yes.
Well, what my personal desire is that our voice takes the lead and not the developer prescribing and telling us this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
This is what we do, so this is what we're bringing in, versus this is what the community says they want, so this is what we're developing.
So that was my point exactly about contractors. If they're taking bids on our work or our development, that we could have someone on our mindset that's not so much trying to get the biggest buck, but assure them the works, so they see a long-term investment. If they keep working with us, they keep building with us, that builds trust with our contractors, that will enhance the pride in their work, the honesty, so that our village leaders trust them to build our stuff. So if we could work with one or two that, like I say, have that mindset and that dream, have some humanity and humility about them, then that way it can assure that they have the same goals as we do, the dream of housing and giving and making affordable for people, period. You know, I just think, you know, if we're taking bids, it doesn't also have to be the cheapest bid, but we need somebody to see how we see through that same binoculars of the future, so to speak.
Well, the most powerful folks in the room are y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be honest.
sure.
And everybody out there,
Yep.
most powerful folks in the city.
That's why I said bring somebody. Every time when you hear these conversations going on, bring your neighbors, bring your friends, bring your families. Get folks out here so that we can say, listen, folks are showing up and this is what they're saying. This is what they want to see happen in our neighborhoods, period. And then it can get pushed forward. Do you see what I'm saying? The more, and I mean more is in more often, and the more is in quantity of people that we have, and voices that we have coming to the table and saying, look, we got this is how this needs to work for us. We can't keep doing what we've been doing. It's not working.
And let them see we're not just going to settle anymore.
And we're not going to just settle. Right, and you have leaders who will step up and step out.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And stand in front of people's places and say, hold on a minute.
We live in the poor proteges.
Too much trouble. I'm in trouble now.
But you know, we have to show up.
Good trouble.
We have to show, that's right, that's good trouble. That's good trouble. We're supposed to show up and get into good trouble together so that we can move some things, right? And that's what this is about right now. We have an opportunity. We have folks that are working with us and saying, yes, we get it. We're with you. We're paying attention. We're listening. We want to support. What does that look like? Okay, let us go find out from the people what it needs to look like.
So we're gonna, kind of land the plane and answer any final questions. One of the things is, as Nikita, you were mentioning, is this communication that we're having as we're talking about different projects that are happening around the city, as we're kind of imagining together as a group, this has to get amplified. We have to actually engage with our friends, family that are out in the community and bring them to these conversations. Because what's going to happen is we're going to give our list, and then, everybody out there going to say, well, they didn't include me. You didn't actually give my idea. I didn't get to tell what I want. They didn't know my story. And so, right? I'm just being real.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we have to do is, in order to really realize our power, we have to come together as a community and actually have that voice, because the city will listen.
Yes.
The commissioners will listen.
Yes, they will.
In fact, like I said earlier, the city's trying to reimagine how they engage about developers.
Yep.
They learned about a year ago, you can't just sneak in a developer, tell us what we're going to do, and that's not the proper order of doing things. So we're trying to do it in the right order, but I don't want the city to say, well, they only got 20 folks. We might as well just do what we normally do.
Yep. No,
So when
it's
is the
all
next
of us
discussion?
showing up.
Oh, well,
What was that?
When is the next discussion?
We will. So that's what I was gonna say. We're gonna have to schedule a series on this one.
Yes.
And what I would like to ask, and I'll put it. We'll make sure that we put it even in the invitation, is that you come with some numbers. Come with some with your list.
what your wants?
Come
What
with your
things
list.
do you want? How much is affordable housing? Because quiet as kept, nobody actually has that real number.
Nope.
The feds have a number, but we want reality.
Or even if you make 30K, you still got bills that's going
That's
to
right.
give you 20K. Seriously,
right.
to have a
Hello.
not even decent life, but
That's right.
manageable.
I got Uncle
So-
Sam, he going cha-ching.
And if
Right.
you're single, you don't have avenues like, somebody might because they got kids, but, not that we try to live off a system, but tax breaks, we don't get that.
Right.
Single people without kids, I don't get that.
Right.
And then my tax, you taking it, so if I was trying to be self-employed, I really gotta pay.
Right.
Then you got people who want to do the illegal side hustles because they want to get ahead and now let the
Get some
system
money.
know just to try to make it,
That's the funny thing. I'm actually kind of glad you brought that up because it's a good way to end. One of the things that economics does is it takes away the need
To do
to
other
do the
things.
side hustle.
Yep.
We talked about that
Illegal
in my
side
human
hustle.
services class today. That's
mean,
the
that's
big.
just real talk.
That's the biggest lever to decrease crime
That's
is
right.
to increase the economic level of a community.
Why? Because there's too much risk. If I'm feeling good, why am I going to risk how I'm feeling good?
Getting money already. Most crimes are economic. Most crimes are financial. Majority of crimes are financial.
There it is.
Even driving with no license, all those things are financial. You got your money right, you have all that in order.
Because there's too much risk.
I am not about to lose everything I got.
No, we're too
By
hard
doing
for it.
something, exactly. So
Right.
that's where we have to get our people.
So it is economics.
Yes.
And we can't let whoever tell us it is not about economics. It is about economics. Because that addresses everything, violence, poverty, everything. So we cannot be afraid to let the city know basically what we want.
Yes.
They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like you do. And we voted them in. Okay, when they're voted in, they got to listen to their constituents. So we want to make sure that we make our voices heard.
That's right.
Yeah, but it is about economics. That can straighten out a bunch of things. They've been talking about transportation, housing, all kind of things. Well, it's about economic development. And we have the plan.
We got a plan.
We got a plan.
We got a plan. We got a plan. We got the people. And quite frankly, we have the collective power.
Yes.
That's huge. That is huge. We have the collective power.
Excuse me.
So what we'll ask is that the next, we will definitely get another one scheduled. We'll get a series scheduled out for these conversations. This is rich. This is important. And let's dig deeper. So I'm going to ask, and you'll see it show up on the invitation. Come with your list. We want to dig deep. We're going to go all the way in. Come with your list of priorities, and your definition of affordability. And bring somebody. About 10.
You want us to do these real quick, Will?
Yes, please. We always trying to do better. So this is just a mechanism. These evaluations are a way for us to show up better, to make sure that we are providing space and opportunity for community voice to really turn into action in our community.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.